Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. Tensions between Israel and Lebanon are escalating over fears that the conflict in Gaza could potentially engulf the eastern Mediterranean. Last week, the Lebanese political party Hezbollah gave the Greek Cypriot administration a stern warning that if Israel uses southern Cypriot bases and airports to attack Lebanon, it would be considered part of the war. In response, Greek Cypriot officials pledged not to provide any logistical support to Israel in a potential war against the Lebanese group. Hezbollah's threat has reopened the long-running relationship between Greek Cypriots and Israel. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan recently cited intelligence reports saying southern Cyprus is being used by certain countries for operations against Gaza under the guise of logistical support. Greek Cyprus, the EU's easternmost member, sits just 160 kilometers from the coast of Lebanon and as well within range of Hezbollah's rockets. In April, Israel conducted military exercises on the island, simulating scenarios against Iran and Lebanon. And joining me now from Amman is Ali Bakir. He is a professor at Qatar University and non-resident senior fellow at Atlantic Council. And from Melbourne, Australia, Shahram Akbarzadeh, a research professor at Deakin University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Ali, last week, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah threatened southern Cyprus with military action if it aided in a potential war against Lebanon. So the question is, how serious of a threat is this?
Well, the threat came in a highly charged environment with propaganda from both sides, Hezbollah and Israel. And given that Cyprus is an EU member, I believe that the threat is actually to pressure the EU, to put pressure on Israel to constrain any kind of coming escalation. Having said this, Hezbollah has indeed missiles that can reach countries such as Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Turkey, and definitely Cyprus. So we should not rule out such a possibility. It's always there. But of course, this kind of a threat, if it is translated into action, it would even expand the scope and the type of the anticipated war. And that's why I don't think at the current moment that at least some parts or involved parts want such a scenario.
So, Shahram, what are Lebanon's concerns when it comes to southern Cyprus's relationship with Israel?
Well, I think it's really the concern of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is concerned that Cyprus has been a gateway for Israeli replenishment of military assets. We know that the two British enclaves in Cyprus have been used for shipment of 4 flights, military flights. We don't know exactly what's been shipped to Israel, but it's a fair guess to say that there are military equipment being shipped to Israel through Cyprus. So Hezbollah is concerned about that, and it's trying to perhaps show that it has the capacity to hit Cyprus, as you mentioned, as my colleague Ali mentioned. Hezbollah missiles can reach Cyprus and can hit Cyprus. So it's a show of force and show of strength from the Hezbollah side. Lebanon as a state is in a very difficult situation because it really doesn't have the military power to withstand an Israeli onslaught. Neither does Hezbollah, to be honest with you. This would really set Lebanon back for decades if there is an all-out conflict with Israel.
So, Ali, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that he stands with Lebanon amid rising tensions with Israel. Erdogan also called on regional countries to back Beirut. So will Israel find itself more isolated if it decides to bring the war to Lebanon?
Let me first say that I agree with Professor Shahram. Lebanon also as a state at the current moment doesn't exist because we don't have a president for the second year, and we don't have empowered government, we don't have empowered prime minister. The parliament is highly decorative, and that's why Hezbollah is acting right now, is controlling borders and strategic assets of Lebanon, and that's why he's acting like the actual supreme leader of Lebanon, and this also adds to the situation. Now, when it comes to Israel, of course, Israel has lost the war since October 7 last year, and Netanyahu in person tries to expand the scope and the escalation of the war. I think that it's already isolated, but the Israelis do not actually care for this because they have the full support of the U.S. administration, plus some European countries such as Germany, UK, and others. And this, of course, means that the Europeans have some responsibility to put pressure on Israel to prevent a kind of all war with Lebanon. Of course, this would, if it happens, it would be devastating for Lebanon as a state and the people. However, Hezbollah will keep getting support from Iran financially, militarily, intelligence, and this puts Lebanon as a state in a critical situation, as I think.
So, Shahram, how has this latest threat from Hezbollah rattled Cyprus's stated neutral position on the Gaza war? I mean, has the Greek Cypriot administration been caught off guard with this latest statements?
Well, definitely, you can say that again. I don't think they expected this kind of explicit finger pointing from Nasrallah, and they were completely caught off guard. Cyprus has had good relationships, good security ties with Israel. There have been military exercises with Israeli troops. But Cyprus has also played a middleman, if you like, opening up a maritime corridor for delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. So Cyprus has been trying to walk a fine line here, and being pointed out like this by Nasrallah, by Hezbollah, has been quite challenging for them.
So early this week, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan cited intelligence reports alleging Greek Cypriots, Greek Cyprus is being used by certain countries for operations against Gaza under the guise of logistical support. So how could Greek Cypriots' alleged support to Israel's war efforts risk further destabilizing the Eastern Mediterranean?
First, let me tell you that there have been reports confirming, actually, been turning Cyprus into a base where intelligence, tactical, logistical, and military support have been sent to Israel from Cyprus, practically by Britain and maybe other countries, including also the Israelis themselves, because the problem with Cyprus is becoming more pro-Israel in the last 10 years, and this is along the Israeli-Cyprus-Greece axis in the Eastern Mediterranean, and this axis has been strengthening the relation between its countries on defense, military, energy, and political situation. So indeed, Cyprus acting in support of Israel can drag the whole region into a fire, and also now is bringing more countries from Eastern Mediterranean and the European countries into the conflict if this is happening. And this is very dangerous and risky, and that's why it triggered Turkish reaction on this case in particular.
On top of what you've just said, Shahran, last December, the Turkish Cypriot president, Ersin Tatar, voiced suspicions about the two British military bases in southern Cyprus of providing military and logistical support to Israel. So where does the UK stand in this war, and what do we know about the presence of US and French military on the territory controlled by the Greek Cypriot administration?
Well, for the UK government, the bases in Cyprus are very important. They serve as intelligence gathering bases as well as logistical point for the Middle East. So any conflict, any tension, any open warfare that between Hezbollah and Cyprus would endanger the lives and endanger UK assets, French assets in the region. So they are very concerned about this. This is not something that they want. And I think Hezbollah is aware of that very point, as your other guest mentioned earlier. This is a way for Hezbollah to exert pressure and influence decision-making in Europe, so that they then in turn talk to Israel and try to tone down Israeli military operations in the region.
So, Ali, Southern Cyprus is a member of the European Union. So how would the European Union react to a potential attack by Hezbollah on Southern Cyprus, and how would that also impact the north?
Well, at the current moment, it's hard to predict how they will react. I mean, the direct reaction came from Greece, which was a little bit stirred or raised confusion because it affirmed the perception that Cyprus doesn't have its own independent decision and it's always aligned or ruled by other countries. And this is not a positive signal at the current moment. For the Europeans, there is no interest for them, of course, to be involved in another war in the region, given that they are mainly focusing on the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the Israelis is putting a lot of pressure on the Europeans by continuing slaughtering the Palestinians and having or demanding the support from certain countries, especially Germany and UK, as I earlier mentioned. But Cyprus has to be very cautious about the current situation. Also, its intelligence relations with the Israelis increased in the last few years. And last summer, for example, they also launched an operation against Hezbollah operatives on the island that meant to execute terrorist operations. So this is kind of sensitive to Hezbollah and Iran at the same time. For the current moment, there is no danger or threat to the northern side of Cyprus, but any kind of escalation would definitely put northern Cyprus in the equation and also could drag Turkey to exert pressure or intervene directly into the conflict. That's why it's important to calm down the situation, de-escalate it, and try to put pressure on Israel, mainly to prevent any kind of such anticipated war from many experts.
So, Shahram, could you talk to us about the importance of this very divided island for Europe's security, since it is the closest part of the continent to the center of the conflict in the Middle East?
Well, it is, as the other guest mentioned, Cyprus is a member of EU and is also very close to the Middle East, only 150 kilometers away from Lebanon, which means that it is very much subject to suffering backlash and being dragged into regional conflicts in the Middle East, which would by default bring EU into those kind of conflicts and tensions, as we have just witnessed. So it's a very tricky situation to be in for Cyprus, and I don't think any of the EU leadership would really want to be in that position of being dragged into yet another conflict in the Middle East.
So, Ali, one last question. What does Israel stand to gain by expanding the Gaza war into Lebanon?
Well, like I said before, Netanyahu has a critical interest in expanding the war to Lebanon, to Syria, to Yemen, to any place he can reach, because he already lost the war in October 7, and he has no other option. If he steps down, they will put him on court for responsibility of the crimes that he has committed. And on the other hand, I don't think Hezbollah has an interest, not because it is a peace-seeking armed group, but because the Iranians don't want to let Hezbollah intervene in the current moment. Well, they want to use the Hezb in a situation where they can extract a lot of interest and wins, and this is when Iran is seeking a nuclear bomb, for example. So currently the Israelis, especially Netanyahu, has an interest in expanding the war. However, I don't think that all Israeli officials are on the same page regarding this issue, and this would trigger also a lot of opposition internally and externally.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.